All right, everybody. Welcome back to another video, and today we're going to be reacting to one of Little Joel, aka Big Joel's videos. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but in the last couple months, I've actually taken a lot of inspiration from Big Joel's recent videos, and I've started to kind of let loose a little bit more with my content, which I've found has made it a lot more enjoyable, like particularly with the phone videos. I don't know if you guys saw the phone videos on my porch or that I made during the road trip with Demon Mama, but the outdoors phone videos are really, really fun, and like, I just kind of let loose with them, and it's a little bit less pressure and less regimented and structured and like serious because there's not chat there distracting me, and I found it was like a lot more fun than my normal content, generally speaking. And you know, I like Big Joel. I like Big Joel's format, and I even took a little bit from Big Joel's format. So with that said, I'm hoping that I like this video because my editor sent it to me, along with a bunch of other people have sent me this and asked me to react to it. They told me I should react to it and, you know, give my thoughts on it because it's about something that I'm somewhat of an expert in. And that topic in question is deradicalization. The video in question is called Deradicalization and YouTube, and we're about to watch it, so let's get right the fuck into it. I really hope this doesn't end up being cringe, because I have disagreed with Big Joel before. Not anything too serious, but, you know, I like agreeing with him, and I don't like disagreeing with him.
Hey everybody, so I've always had kind of a trepidation about the concept of de-radicalization. For those who don't know, in like 2017 to 2019, there emerged a group of YouTubers who people started calling bread tubers, and I was one of them. I was to some extent one of them. I was like a D-list bread tuber. And
nah, that's not true. Big Joel is at the very least, like at the very least, a B+ list bread tuber. Like, I would be a D list bread tuber, especially back during that era. Like, I'm a D list bread tuber. Big Joel is not a D list bread tuber. You cannot be past 100k subs and be considered D list as far as left tube standards, okay? Like, the left does not have that large of a presence on YouTube for, like, how many subs does Big Joel have? Just his, like, other channel, like, Little Joel has 102k subs. The Big Joel channel has 602,000. Okay,
hey
yeah.
everybody.
I'm sorry. Maybe this is just me being bitter, but I've got, you know, like, I can't look at somebody who has 600k subs on their main channel and 100k on their alt channel saying they're a D-list bread tuber and like, take that seriously. I'm sorry. That's B+ list at the very least.
So I've always had kind of a trepidation about the concept of de-radicalization. For those who don't know, in like 2017 to 2019, there emerged a group of YouTubers who people started calling bread tubers, and I was one of them. I was to some extent one of them. I was like a D-list bread tuber. And the main thing about bread tubers, like one of the main sales pitches of breadtube was de-radicalizing people, making people not radical. And
So this is really weird because there are two groups of people who I have found consistently argue there is no such thing as the alt-right rabbit hole, and nobody was de-radicalized from the right, or like I should say pulled away from the right by like left-wing YouTube content. There are two groups who claim this: Nazis and conservatives, and video essayist lefties. I don't know why, but these are the two groups who consistently falsely like argue that there is no like alt-right rabbit hole and nobody is getting pulled out of it by like left-wing content having a higher prevalence in that sphere, which to me just seems ridiculous because that's what got me out of it and a lot of other people out of it. And also like getting into politics a lot more over the years, like learning more about it and getting more experienced with politics and the state of things has made it more clear than ever that online culture war issues, the topics that dumbass YouTubers are talking about, are affecting real-world politics more than ever. I don't know if you guys remember, but woke, the term woke was just something that like right-wing YouTubers were reeing about a few years ago. Now there's things like the Stop Woke Act. And when you watch any mainstream conservative news outlet, they're talking about the new woke this or the new woke that. Like, all the like normies now know what the word woke means because it is perpetrated itself into, or perpetrated, it has precipitated into, out of the internet and into real world politics. It's having more of a real world effect than ever, and that's why I think that the whole de-radicalizing people, whatever you want to call it thing, just creating an environment where people can find arguments in favor of progressive values, that essentially, I think it's valuable. I think it matters, and I think it helps. Maybe not a lot. Maybe it does help a lot. I really don't know, but I know it helps to some extent, and that's what matters to me.
I always hated it. I always hated that. I always saw this claim being made of my work and thought to myself, that ain't true. I'm not de-radicalizing shit. But the thing is, I was never able to put my finger on why I didn't like this word.
I will say, the word de-radicalize is a poor use of language. I don't know if you guys remember, but that the reason why the word de-radicalize is used so much is because of an individual by the name of Caleb Cain. We're going back into some ancient history here, but there was a time after the Christchurch shooting where an individual called Faraday Speaks on YouTube uploaded a viral video talking about how he fell down the alt-right rabbit hole and how he got out of it. In fact, that video inspired me to tell my story because I saw a lot of similarities in what we went through. And for a while, we hung out a little bit after that, but I haven't really talked to him in a really long time. But that's what I remember of the entire ordeal. And he kind of went viral after he posted this video. A bunch of like news outlets ended up interviewing him, and I also got interviewed as well by like the New York Times about this, and like the state of politics on YouTube and how people are falling down these rabbit holes of politics online, and like ending up, maybe they start with anti-feminist content, but then they end up chanting "Jews will not replace us" at Charlottesville, right? That was essentially the idea of the article, and the word that kept on being used in reference to figures like ContraPoints and Destiny, like lefty YouTubers who help pull people out of this, was de-radicalization, de-radicalization, de-radicalize. And that was that word was the word used by that one that one journalist, and from that point that word has become like the standard word used for like when someone gets unshutted. Essentially, when they stop being, whether it be like they stop being just kind of a chud and become lefty, or like we're a full-on Nazi and then become a lefty. It is a pretty like shitty word to use. Like it just kind of sounds cringe. Rehabilitation is also pretty cringe as well. I'm not a big fan of that either. But like, I think de-chudding is pretty good as well. Just de-chudding.
Until now, until like 5 minutes ago. And then I scrambled up my phone to make this video like a little content weasel. So here's the thing. Whenever
I'm also a content weasel. Let's go.
People talk about de-radicalizing, whenever people claim that work like mine de-radicalize them, I always feel this inner angst inside of me, this ghost that tells me that when people are using the word radical, when they talk about falling down the alt-right pipeline, in many cases, not all, but many cases,
I'm going to predict what he's going to say. In many cases, they were just like kind of like edgy, they were just kind of an edgelord. They were just watching like some feminist owned compilations or like some like really basic stuff, and they call that radical. That's what he's going to say. He's going to point out a very basic and like obvious critique with the word de-radicalization. I think I already made this argument earlier.
What they're talking about is that they, as a 14-year-old boy, watched anti-SJW YouTubers on the internet.
I did not pre-watch this video, by the way, guys. I'm just that good.
Watched a bunch of cringy anti-SJW YouTubers who said a bunch of lame shit about women and minorities, who enjoyed them, who enjoyed how edgy they were, and who were starting to enjoy that sort of thing. And I gotta be honest with you, I think many of the people...
Listen, I'm not trying to be an asshole to Big Joel here. The reason why I was so good at predicting what he was about to say is I felt that too, Like, I have seen when people say, "Oh, you de-radicalized me, Zan." It's like, okay, you were obviously like not even as far right as I was at my worst, you know? Like you were like a little edgy lord, you know? You weren't that, but you know, I just kind of look at that and I go, "Okay, but I know what they meant, right?" And I don't really linger on it. It doesn't bother me that much. I just move on and I'm happy that like someone changed for the better, right? Like someone changed for the better, and that's what makes me happy. I don't like it. Doesn't bother me so much that they use that word. But you know, I get what Big Joel feels. I feel like if you let this bother you that much as a content creator on the left, you are actively hindering the ability that you have to convince people your values are better, whether that be your goal or not. Because I genuinely don't feel like Big Joel makes persuasive content. Well, I'm going to take you guys back to middle school English here, but there are different types of writing, right? And I don't think that the type of speaking that Big Joel does is meant to convince you. I don't think it's like designed to try to convince an audience to agree with what he agrees with, right? I think he makes entertaining content where his values are evident and people end up moving towards his values because through his humor, he effectively argues for his positions. Or at least I should say effectively argues against positions that he doesn't agree with, right? Does that make sense? He does not intend to convince people, but he does it regardless. And I feel like the fact that he's credited for convincing people kind of frustrates him because it almost puts pressure on him that he doesn't want to have, but it's not that big a deal. It's just you do the stuff that you're doing, that you've always been doing, and people are going to be moving away from the right and more towards like more progressive values. It's just kind of how it is, as long as you make good progressive content, I guess.
For whom this is the case, they just kind of grew up. They just kind of grew up. One day, they looked at Sargon of Akkad and they said,
okay, so I've said this a lot, and I agree in part with what Big Joel is saying here. In part. A lot of the shit that you see online, like a lot of the Nazis you see online are edgy 14-year-olds that are going to grow out of it in a few years. But when I say they're going to grow out of it, I don't mean like they're going to grow up and that's automatically going to make them stop believing that because, hey, newsflash, there's a lot of adult Nazis and reactionaries out there. Turning 18 and losing your virginity or whatever doesn't automatically 100% fix that problem. For many, it may. Experience and just growing up, meeting new people, getting a girlfriend, losing your virginity, that these things for a lot of people will move them away from the crazy conservative values that are so popular now. However, generally speaking, there needs to be more. Time doesn't equal growth. Time plus experience equals growth. And ideally, those experiences wouldn't be watching more reactionary content. They might grow out of Sargon of Akkad or anti-SJW owned compilations and move on to Ben Shapiro or Matt Walsh. Those shows are much more dry and boring, meant for an older audience, like late 20s and whatnot, like podcast kind of listeners, right? It's very clear that these people have a large audience and a large pool in a, older demographic. Because they can still keep those people in this mindset as they get older if those people aren't exposed to contrary ideas. It's why they fight so hard against Zoomers getting a college education. They're so afraid of even conservative Zoomers being exposed to progressive values in college that they might, change their mind like any reasonable person would when exposed to the truth.
Said, oh, this guy is the stupidest man I've ever seen in my life. Oh, this man is the absolute dumbest human being I've ever seen in my life. And what's more, he's very lame. Like, he's lame and dumb. And you saw that. You were mature enough to see this fact about him. And then you stopped being into it. You stopped being into it. It was a phase. It was a phase where...
You guys can go back and look at both... if you want to go back and look at the famous Faraday Speaks, How I Fell Down the Alt-Right Pipeline and Got Out video, you can go watch that. And you could also watch my video that I made. Either one, it doesn't matter. Both of them, you will find that we both said, yes, our, belief in these values was starting to get shook by certain experiences we were having. But it took someone who is competent at arguing for progressive values coming along and being exposed to us to make us change our mind. For example, I realized that No Bullshit was kind of a dumbass. And you know what I did? I started seeking out content debunking No Bullshit. And that was a step that started to lead me towards LeftTube and consuming that content. And I might not have pursued, like getting out of that content or like, just like, I might have just stopped watching him and watched someone else who says the same shit just in less of a dumbass way. Instead, I found a pretty hardcore debunk of the values that he holds that made me think. And that had to compound multiple times to actually really pull me out of these values. It's not just growing up that pulls you out of it, it's experience. Xanderhall, people's thoughts are only as good as the quality of language they have access to. Very, very well put, Somniostatic. That was very well worded.
Where you were watching YouTube content. You know what I mean? And here's the thing. I'm not trying to illegitimize anybody's political story. I'm not trying to tell you that you're worse.
But that is a little weird that he said that you were watching YouTube content. Like, Nick Fuentes was on YouTube. Like, there are people on YouTube who are watching Nick Fuentes and getting inspired to go to the next, like, rally he's gonna do for America First. That's pretty radicalized.
Or a shitty person because you liked Gamergate in 2016. Like, yes, obviously that sucked, but we can get over that. We can get over that together. But my problem with the narrative of de-radicalization is that it almost causes us to legitimize these political identities. That it treats a 14-year-old boy who is surfing 4chan and watching Sargon of Akkad and Teal Deer as like a real legitimate, meaningful political identity.
Okay, this argument I feel like might have held more water 3 years ago. Like, he listed, like, one of the examples he listed there, like, Sargon, I guess he's sort of relevant, I guess, kind of. He's rebranded and has sort of a relevant platform with that rebrand. But, like, Teal Deer, I don't know if he even makes content anymore. That's, like, an OG anti-feminist channel. Like, I don't know. Like, I really don't think at this point, like, this feels so out of date, you know? Like, I get it. I get that it's just a rant video and he's just expressing his feelings, but like the whole de-radicalization era of LeftTube, that was 2019 to 2020 at the latest, you know? I feel like that's all done. You know, no one's talking about that anymore. The left doesn't give a fuck about de-radicalization or convincing people anymore. It is actually a relatively small and unfortunately quiet, group of the left or majority of the left. A small majority. It feels like, yeah, a small majority. I mean that. I meant to say that. It feels like a small, quiet majority of the left that, cares about people moving over to the left these days, you know? There's a smoke screen of loud woke scolds and tankies that have tried to make the left this cringy social club that have made the left look very repellent to the average person, even to a lot of the left itself, you know? How many times have you seen, like, let's check Twitter. Oh boy, another psyop. Oh boy, people are falling for it. I'm just not going to go on Twitter today. How many times has that happened to you? Hypers in chat. Come on. Be honest. I wake up and there's another psyop, exactly.
And it isn't one. If it didn't add up to anything, if you just had some shitty thoughts from YouTube videos that you saw, that's what happened. That's what happened to you. And I worry that this narrative of
that's not very, it's not really, that's kind of a mouthful, you know? I feel like fell down the alt-right rabbit hole is a pretty concise way to word it. It's very recognizable too.
Radicalization toward the right, followed by de-radicalization, kind of causes us to not just be able to sit with the fact that in our past, when we were teenagers, we were just cringe little guys. You were just a cringe guy who liked...
Sure, but there are tons of teenagers out there on the internet that aren't cringe, that hold progressive values and are in fact in Big Joel or even my audience, and are completely decent people, and they're, in fact, watching my content most likely because they hold the values that, I argue for, many of them are LGBT. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't think saying, oh, young people are just idiots, whatever, is a good excuse for, I think we should maybe, care about making particularly young people online more open to progressive values. Like, maybe they should not immediately be bombarded with right-wing propaganda the second they get online. Like, maybe there should be some progressive values out there for them to see. Just maybe. You might, maybe.
Cringy content and made edgelord jokes and sucked ass. That's what you were. For some of you, that's...
I wasn't expecting him to downplay radicalization at all, TBH, lol. Well, like, I think a lot of, as I said at the beginning of the video, the two groups of people who always claim the alt-right rabbit hole isn't real, or, like, basically implicitly say it's not, are Nazis and alt-righters and BreadTube video essayists. Those are the two groups that, like, most incessantly argue there's no such thing as the alt-right rabbit hole, or at least imply it, I don't know why, but those two particular groups are so goddamn, like, hell-bent on that argument.
That's what you were. On some level, you just gotta live with that now. You gotta own that part of yourself that everyone does. That 14-year-old inside of you who's just sucked ass, who everyone hated, and who you hated yourself. Everyone hated you, and you hated...
I think that people talking about being de-radicalized have accepted it if they're talking about it and saying they were wrong, and now they changed their mind and now they hold correct values. That this feels so pretentious. Why do so many lefty, like, video BreadTube people fall into this trap of just coming off as pretentious assholes to anybody who, one, was once conservative and then is not, or two, is conservative and may be considering not being conservative anymore? Like, imagine stumbling across this video if you're, like, 60% of the way to getting out of the right-wing shithole and into the left. Like, can you imagine, like, you stumble across this video when you're, like, 60% of the way out? Skill issue? Jeez.
Yourself, you were lame and everyone hated you, and that's the truth, because you sucked. Because you sucked then. I am genuinely happy and moved when I see people developing politically in certain ways because of things I say. And again, I'm not trying to shame anybody in my audience, but
I don't feel like he's trying to, but it does come off that way. Remember, I like Big Joel. I don't dislike Big Joel, and I don't want to come off too harsh here because I like Big Joel. It does come off that way, It does. It does kind of seem like you're judging.
At some point, I really think it does benefit us to be able to sit with ourselves and say, I wasn't going on some big political journey. I sucked. I sucked.
I feel like a lot of people who've told their stories of getting out of this have discussed the fact that they were close to either harming themselves or someone else. Like, the particularly viral stories about this came from people who were, like, close to, like, acting on these values and were pulled out of it. Particularly, I forget what his name is. Daryl Davis, I think his name is. He was, he's the guy who's famous for de-radicalizing the Klan members. Is that his name? Daryl Davis? Does anybody know the name I'm talking about? He was a phony? Wait, he was? No! Wait, are we talking about the right person? Okay, regardless. When you look at most of the videos where somebody tells their story of how they got de-radicalized from the far right, whether you hate the terminology or not, right? They'll usually discuss the fact that they were close to doing something about it. Hell, look at the manifestos of the ones who did do something about it. How many manifestos have you seen me or Vosh or somebody else live stream, read, and cover reading a Nazi mass shooter or a Nazi mass killer's manifesto where they talk about how their eyes were open to the problem that was happening because of YouTube content? Hell, the Christchurch shooter literally named his manifesto The Great Replacement, which is a conspiracy theory that was popularized by Lauren Southern, who's a YouTuber. Like, I just, hey, dude, come on. there are some people who are going a little further than just being, kind of sucking when they're 14, Like someone who kind of sucks at 14 might really suck when they're 18, you know? Hell, they might really suck when they're 15. How old was Kyle Rittenhouse? They might suck when they're 14 and then really suck when they're 17.
Ass. I think there's power in that. A power that is not caught by the word deradicalize.
So cool. Yeah, so I don't agree with most of what was said in that video. I know that Big Joel isn't trying to really argue for anything. Like, Big Joel just kind of makes rant videos, essentially. Like, that's all that he really tries to do, and he's just kind of expressing how he feels. But I feel, I'm just expressing how I feel, And while I do hope that people are, primarily, I hope that people are entertained by my content. My secondary priority is that people are convinced by my content to adopt not exactly my values, but values that are more morally good than the ones they hold currently, right? Does that make sense? I hope if Big Joel sees this video, he doesn't feel like I like went too hard or like I was an asshole or anything, because I really like Big Joel. I don't know if he likes me particularly well, but if he doesn't know who I am, I would hate if this is his first interaction with me or like his first introduction to me, and it was like me ripping his video apart. But like, listen, I like his content. It's disappointing to see so many content creators that I like on the left adopt this mindset that's so unproductive to anything the left stands for or any progressive should value. Anyway, that's really all I have to say.